All right, welcome to the Underdog Ecom podcast, where two ecom brand founders are figuring out in real time.
Yeah, we're not here to preach. We're here in the thick of it, making mistakes, testing all sorts of ideas, and really sharing the journey of how we've been growing these brands from day zero. Hopefully you learn a little bit, perhaps come away with some ideas that save you time and money. And so if you're tired of the same glittery D2C advice from those 9-figure gurus, you're here in the right place. Welcome to the first episode of the Underdog Ecom podcast. This is an introduction podcast episode just to kind of give you a feel for what we're doing here. E-commerce podcasts love to highlight billion-dollar success stories, but what about the rest of us? This is not going to be a polished story about how we built a 10-figure business, but we are here thicking it out, trying to figure out our way in the journey of e-commerce. And it's going to be our journey and our stories and sort of the day-to-day of what we're battling. It's the raw, unfiltered reality of what it's like to be building an e-commerce brand in the trenches. We started this podcast because we want to share what it's like to do just that. We're building from day zero. We're not D2C influencers or brand gurus or VC-backed operators. We're just two operators, two founders operating in the thick of it, trying to grow profitably and make these dreams come into reality.
Yeah, I think ecom is a really hard business to be in, but it's also so much fun. And I think sometimes, it could be too focused on the revenue numbers, too focused on like growth and all that sort of stuff in e-commerce. But I think that's not why we got into it. And I think that's not why we do it. Obviously, we're always trying to grow our businesses and there's some challenges we've come across the way. But I think, I think David and I just really align on the fact that there's so many opportunities starting your own brand in e-commerce. And I think it's a really good opportunity to share the ins and outs of how we're trying to navigate it and all the things that are changing around us as we try and build our brands.
Yeah, and we found that there's a lot of podcasts and just media and content out there in general that shares a lot of tips and tricks and strategies and all sorts of stories about e-commerce, but it's highly focused on the very pinnacle of the pyramid. It's the folks that are building 10, 12, 11, 90-figure businesses or VC-backed. And in the past, we found that a lot of those same strategies just don't apply to the small underdog brands of the world. And so that's why we're here to help elevate those stories and share our journey and tips and hope that we can help those folks in those positions.
Yeah, and I think what'd be really cool as well is I think one thing to mention is David started a ecom Slack group called Underdog Ecom that has a lot of small brand operators in it that I was lucky enough to join as well, and that's how I connected with David. And I think what was really cool about that, David, is it just gave an opportunity for it's a safe space really for small brand owners like myself to try and navigate, but also share challenges and meet other people in, similar sizes. Because sometimes in these other ecom groups that we're part of, it's quite a scary atmosphere where you've got, brands doing, tens of millions, if not more, some of them. And you've got smaller brands as well. And you don't really know where you sit, in that line. But also, sometimes, you just want to ask real questions that maybe a bigger brand has already solved. And I think it's a really good space for brands to just be able to kind of communicate and get to know each other. And there's been some really interesting conversations in the community. And I think that's why we wanted to bring it to the pod as well, is kind of discuss it in real time as well and share some of the things we're going through.
Yeah, so we'll leave links to the community group down in the footer or whatnot, the footnotes of each episode. So you can join if you're in that position where you're an underdog e-commerce operator or founder and looking to connect with other like-minded individuals. And it has been an amazing just community of folks that are trying to figure things out together and sort of solve the e-commerce equation. So we figured we'd talk a little bit more about kind of our backgrounds and more about this pod too. Do you want me to kick it off?
Yeah, kick it off.
With the background? All right. I'm David. I started a little apparel brand as a side project, sort of passion project. It started on Twitter as less of an apparel brand and more of just a question of basically answering if a certain landmark was out in the area. I'm in the Seattle area, so there's a certain landmark that's really cool. But all along the way, I stumbled my way into e-commerce, didn't know anything about product or design or apparel or supply chains, marketing, websites, literally nothing. So I've learned everything myself from the ground up, from day zero. And it's been a stumbling journey through the woods. So I'm hoping that a lot of the stuff that I can share, a lot of the mistakes and things that I did wrong, I can share and help other people to avoid those same things.
And am I right, David? Just want to ask a question on that actually. Did you start? It started as very much like a community, right? It started with your Instagram group and following and things like that. And it kind of actually like almost the e-commerce segment was secondary before, like you started really building this community before you even had any product to sell. Is that right?
Yeah. The brand's been very community driven since day zero. It started as a Twitter account and then Instagram, and it was kind of just like this fan club of basically for the certain landmark that's in our area, and then just broadly speaking, the Northwest and mountains in general. And so that's been core to the mission and core to like the concept of the brand since day zero.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think community aspect is so cool, especially with like, especially with your local area and all of that. I think it's really, really interesting. From my perspective, I think what's really cool about ecom, just want to say as well, is that like everyone comes from very different backgrounds. So like my story is quite different as well, in that I was actually a pro athlete. So I traveled as a professional tennis player for quite a few years, up until really the pandemic, and that was kind of my journey set. I wanted to make it as a pro tennis player, even though like 0.001% make a living, but I wanted to try, and I had it in my head since I was like 7 years old. That's what I wanted to do. But while I was playing on the tour, I was traveling a lot with a lot of bags and taking a lot of equipment around with me, and I got sick of that sort of travel, for sport, and like the difficulties carrying tennis rackets and gear and everything from place to place. And so I started kind of really designing bags for myself as an athlete to make it easier to travel, and kind of got into really interested in the whole product design element in textiles. I went to a few trade shows that were all about seeing like, what big brands like Patagonia, North Face and what they were doing, and got really into the design aspect of it, and was started designing the bags while I was still playing. And then by the time just after the pandemic, I'd actually did a small Kickstarter campaign and launched, actually Indiegogo campaign, and then launched on WooCommerce to start. Had a lot of problems there, and then onto Shopify, and kind of the rest is history. But yeah, I think so. I never really expected to get into it, but there's a lot of similarities I think as well, as in terms of like when you're doing something solo as an athlete and you're doing it in business. So I kind of tried to take some of those across from tennis to business, but it's been a fun journey.
That's pretty cool. It is so cool to hear all the unique backgrounds and kind of like people's passions that play out into ecom, and like the problems that they're trying to solve on their own turns into like a business or whatnot. It's pretty cool. Going forward on the pod, so we're going to cover a lot of topics, and a lot of it will be more conversational, but we're going to be as honest and transparent as possible. We're not here to shill a bunch of apps or anything like that. We're here to talk through our journeys and just what it's like to run our businesses, and hopefully share a lot of wins and losses and challenges and lessons learned. So if you're running your own shop or business, or trying to learn more about e-commerce, you're in the right place. We're going to cover a lot of different topics in that realm. So like marketing strategies, and all of this is going to be with our brand sizes in mind. We're the underdogs. We're not the huge brands like we've kind of talked about. And so these are going to be things that are very specific to where we're at in the brand cycle, all across the whole board: supply chain, fulfillment, paid ads, paid organic media, non-organic media, paid media, Shopify updates. We also want to be kind of like open and transparent around the difficulties of running ecom. Like Jack had said earlier, it is very, very difficult. And that's one reason that I'd started the Underdog Ecom community, is because connecting with other people that are in this journey and trying to solve the problems was important to kind of band together. And so mental health, burnout, like all the realities of bootstrapping an ecom business, we're going to try and get into that. Schedule wise, we're not quite sure. We're figuring this out as we go, if that's not obvious. And so probably weekly, maybe bi-weekly episodes. It's going to be mostly conversation between Jack and I. There might be some opportunities for guest interviews or other folks to come on and share stuff, but we're here to just have that open conversation about the journey and what we're going through and what we're working on.
Yeah, and I think what's really going to be hopefully quite unique about this is that we're kind of really fine with, like David said, being open with numbers, open with failures. I think that's something that, we're all listening to a lot of podcasts, we're all reading a lot of articles and a lot of in our groups. And I think like sometimes it can get a bit overwhelming when you only hear success stories, and there are a lot, and you can learn just
Yeah.
as much, if not more, from your failures. And so
Yeah.
I think what's a really good opportunity is like other small brands who are starting out, who are maybe where we are or slightly beyond where we are. There's still a lot of learnings can come from some of the failures we've had, we're continuing to have in real time, which I think is quite fun, but also just being real with the numbers and not being afraid to kind of share some of the real difficulties we're going through. I think it'll be really helpful. And I think it's helpful for us, bit of therapy as well.
It's just, yeah, definitely. So we're excited for this. Hope you tag along and join us on the journey. We're going to be posting on YouTube and all the other typical channels where you find your podcasts these days on the wide world of the internet. And we're excited to go forward.
Yeah, and if you're enjoying it, please like share it, let everyone else know in the ecom community. It's a small community, but I think we can all learn a lot from each other. So yeah, share it, let everyone else know, and hopefully there'll be some interesting content for everyone.
And guess what? Coming very soon, episode 2, we're going to be doing a deep dive into our Shopify app list. That's right. It's going to be fully transparent, fully open, and we're going to go gladiator style through Jack and Mai's apps that we use in Shopify, and thumbs up, thumbs down. What do we keep? What do we not?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. App bloat is real right now, and my Shopify bill is getting out of control. So looking forward to sharing, and yeah, definitely killing off some apps that aren't necessary in our business size.
Stay tuned for the great app purge of 2025, episode 2 of the Underdog Ecom podcast.